I call the September 29, 2022 Board of Supervisor meeting to order. May we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Next on the agenda, thank you, sir. I was looking for that. Next on the agenda is the public input session. You can talk about anything that we don't have on the agenda to discuss tonight. And you have 3 minutes to speak. And at the end of 2 minutes, I will hold up this 1 minute sign and let you know you have 1 minute left. All right. The public input session is now open. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm George Bott, District 1. I've got 4 brief things tonight. The Rappahannock Record today had a front page article on the historic ship, the Claude Summers, with a tie-in to the Hospice Turkey Shoot Regatta, a real nice article. This regatta was going to be this weekend. Unfortunately, we had to postpone it due to safety concerns for our sailors, so the regatta is postponed for 2 weeks. It'll now be the 14th, 15th, and 16th of October. As you might recall, it's the largest hospice regatta in the nation. It's the largest regatta in the Southern Bay. And we raise quite a bit of money for hospice support services of the Northern Neck and also Riverside hospice agencies. Just before the meeting, I gave Mr. Palin a letter. In the spring, he and I and Joan Kravitz signed a joint letter to the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation asking that the historic ship Godspeed come up next year and in subsequent years to support the Turkey Shoot Regatta. And there was a very favorable response. Earlier, I gave Jessica Davis a copy for the schools. There's a tie-in. The ship will be at the Tides Inn, which loves to have her. 3 and 4th graders, if they visit, which they will, I believe, and from Northumberland County, they get credit for Virginia history. And this year, there's also next year, a tie-in to the Boys and Girls Club if they come down to visit the ship. So I want to thank the chairman and Joan for doing that. Oh, by the way, that letter was addressed to Dr. Charlotte Silverman, rather than to either of the board chairmen. Charlotte was the team leader who led this effort. And if you don't know, Charlotte's leaving us and she's going to be sorely missed, along with her husband, Gary. For the record, I just want to request that Lowry Creek Road, Virginia Route 731, be considered for the Rural Rustic Road Program. I've talked to my supervisor, Mr. Giese, and Don Gill about that, and they said they would get with Mr. Beal. Lastly, on the waterfront, 2 marinas recently sold. Todd and Kara Patterson bought Yankee Point Marina, and they've added 10 employees since April. Lisa and Clay Holcomb just sold Chesapeake Boat Basin, and both sales were at premium prices. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Wow. Anyone else? Anyone else? Anybody online? Okay, public input session is now closed. VDOT.
Good evening. I'm David Beal, resident engineer of the Northern Neck. It's good to be with you all. I'll start with the main thing, which isn't on the report, and that's Tropical Storm Ian, or Hurricane Ian. Hopefully it's tropical storm by the time it gets here, or less. But we have been watching forecasts and we're ready to respond. We're expecting 2 to 4 inches of rain, gusts from 30 to 40 miles an hour. And we'll monitor the weather tomorrow and throughout the weekend and respond accordingly. I think the ferries are going to be able to run a little bit tomorrow, so we're going to let them run until it's too windy to do so, and then we'll shut them down until we can start them back up. So that's our plan. If there are any concerns throughout the event, feel free to reach out to me. We have completed some brush cutting in the Mary Point area. We worked on the shoulders on Route 3 and driveway aprons. We repaired pipes on Route 3, Davis Mill, and Tomlin Trace. We did some site distance mowing on James B. Jones. We've patched potholes throughout the county, cleaned pipes throughout the county, and we have replaced the guide cable on the Mary Point. So if you recall, the drive cable broke last summer. We've replaced them both now, so we should be good for some time. I mentioned we're preparing for Ian. We're going to continue to cut brush countywide, patch potholes, clean pipes. The contractor is working on mowing the secondary routes currently. The litter pickup is almost finished, and we've just begun mowing secondary routes. We have additional shoulder repairs to make on Route 3, 201 near the UPS, and then we have begun our snow season prep. We are actively recruiting snow vendors, tractors, single axle dump trucks, and tandem axle dump trucks are in need. So if you or any of your friends would like to plow for VDOT, let us know. The pavement schedule, we're almost done. The surface treatment, the fixed completion date on that is October 15th, so they have a couple more weeks to finish. I do believe they'll be done in about a week or so. So that looks like it's on target to come in on time. The Cape Seal schedule, we had been waiting for striping on Windmill Point Road. That is now complete. The latex schedule is complete. Plant mix, we had a hiccup out here, and the reflectors got put in offset from the center. So the contractor is going to have to mill up the center pull here on Route 3 and then reinstall the reflectors in the right location and then stripe the road in the right location. So we have some additional work here in the center of Route 3 through the courthouse that remains to be done. Fixed completion on that is November 15th. I hope that it will be done before November 15th. On the smart scale, the Kilmarnock right turn lane, we are going to post a willingness to hold a public hearing. That's a fairly small project. It only impacts the one parcel there. So we're planning to post a willingness to hold a public hearing, and that ad will probably be coming out in the next couple of weeks, but as soon as I get a date, I'll let Mr. Gill know. We will post signs on the property as well. And then I wanted to correct one thing. I believe I misspoke last month when I was talking about the scour repair project. That's Camps Prong on Route 3. I said something about that being near the county line, and I had that confused with Chin's Mill. But you all are very gracious and didn't correct me on the spot. But Camps Prong, just west of Kilmarnock on the 4-lane section on Route 3, that's where the scour repair project is. And that ad date is December of 22. So that is my update for you all. I did note the gentleman's comment about 731 being added for rural rustic, and when we update the secondary 6-year plan in the spring, that's something the board could prioritize at that time if that's your wish. But I'll look into that and be prepared to answer any questions on that at that time.
Y'all have any questions, gentlemen?
I have just one. Were you able to find an update on that right-of-way down there in Akron? I've also noticed that as you get ready to mow, there's several other sharp curves in Akron where they haven't been clearing the turn radius like they used to in the past.
Yeah, I have not found where we have an easement on that curve or permission to mow. We are planning to, that has not been mowed this fall yet. So we are planning to mow the right-of-way there, but we wouldn't mow beyond the right-of-way.
So why was it maintained in the past and now all of a sudden these turns aren't being maintained? Because there's several of them now down there that are becoming hazards as you can't see around the turns any longer. And for the past forever, they've always been mowed by VDOT.
Based on my understanding is we haven't done it. Maybe the property owner has done it. And I looked at it on Google Images, and the way that it was mowed looked like it was cut with a with a residential type manicure mow. It wasn't maintained with a bush hog like we would do. So my presumption is that the homeowner was doing it, and the homeowner is no longer doing that now that that area is, the trees are gone and grown up or whatever. But we are going to mow the right of way around that curve.
All right, any other questions?
David, one thing I see you've got on here mowing the secondary routes. One of the big problems we have farming now is ragweed, and it's becoming resistant to some of the chemicals we use. And it's really heavy on the side of these roads, secondary routes and those things. So if it's any way you can maybe in the future, I know right now it'd be hard to change, is move that secondary cutting up some before it goes to seed, would really be helpful, because if it goes to seed and then it gets bush hogged, it gets slung in our fields, and it's become more expensive and harder to control as far as that. So just wanted to let you know that.
Okay, I'd appreciate being able to talk with you about that in more detail.
Okay.
My philosophy has been to wait till the very end of the season to mow. We only mow secondary routes twice.
Mm-hmm.
So we get them, as late as we can in the spring, and then, towards the end of the fall. But, there's a little window that we can, I don't know when it goes to seed. So
Yeah,
there's a window there that we could play with. But,
Yeah, and I can, because I've actually mowed a couple of my own fields where it was getting bad myself, but it is becoming a real problem, and I'd be happy to talk with you about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you all.
All right, good.
Stay dry.
Okay. All right. Now we have presentations. We have here before us to consider a resolution honoring the Armstead S. Nickens and proclaiming October 15, 22 as Armstead S. Nickens Day in Lancaster County. And also request honor a request from the Virginia Historic Society to borrow his picture so they could have it down there at the function on October 14th and 15th, actually at the museum. And I'd like to take the time to read the resolution. And it says, a resolution adopted by the Lancaster County Board of Supervisors honoring Armstead Stocklus Nickens, whereas Armstead Stocklus Nickens, 1836 to 1906, was born into a family of free people of color that included at least 12 veterans of the Revolutionary War. And whereas in 1867, the local agent of the Freedmen's Bureau identified Armstead S. Nickens as a strong potential candidate for public office. And whereas on December 6, 1871, the Honorable Armstead S. Nickens took the oath of office as a member of the House of Delegates representing Lancaster County, Virginia. And whereas the Honorable Armstead S. Nickens was assigned to 2 committees, militia and police, agriculture and mining. And whereas the Honorable Armstead X. Nickens was the first and only black state legislator from Lancaster County, was elected 1871 and served 2 terms in the Virginia legislation. And whereas the Honorable Armstead X. Nickens donated land and helped to build one of the first schools for African Americans in Lancaster County. And whereas the Honorable Armstead S. Nickens worked diligently for the interests of all citizens of the county, including being an early advocate of what decades later became the Downing Bridge. And whereas the Honorable Armstead X. Nickens owned more than 150 acres of land by 1906. And whereas on February 24, 1990, the presentation and unveiling of the portrait of the Honorable Armstead S. Nickens was formally accepted and received by the order of the Circuit Court Judge Joseph E. Spruill, Jr. in commemoration at the Black Achievement Program. And whereas on February 24, 1990, the portrait of the Honorable Armstead S. Nickens was hung and positioned in the foyer of the Lancaster County Circuit Court House. And whereas at the April 25, 2019 Lancaster County Board of Supervisors meeting, it was recommended that the portrait of the Honorable Armstead S. Nickens be moved into the Board of Supervisors meeting room, where it is located to date. And whereas on October the 15th, 2022, a historical highway marker is being erected to celebrate the local, regional, and statewide historical achievements of the Honorable Armstead S. Nickens and his lifetime commitment to education, public affairs, and civic duties for all citizens. Now therefore be it resolved that the Lancaster County Board of Supervisors hereby declare and proclaim October 15th, 2022 to be Armstead Nickens Day in Lancaster County, Virginia, and we call this observation to the attention of all our citizens. I've read the resolution, and I move that we adopt this resolution. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That's a unanimous vote. All right. Now, before I make the presentation, I would like to move that also that we make this his portrait available to the Historic Society. Homestead. It's back there, yeah. I was looking for it, back there, all right. Make his portrait available to the Historic Society on October the 14th and through the 17th. So moved. All right, so, okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Unanimous vote. Okay. Mrs. Hunter, if you come forward.
Is it okay if my other family members come with
Oh,
me?
yes. Come on, please.
Family?
I'm gonna get out of the way, let me get out.
Mr. Hale, maybe the portrait behind the
I
picture.
was thinking about that. Can we?
Or I can hold a portrait.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good idea. Yes, hello. How are you?
What do you think? If they stood there, or do you want us to, this is the picture of the portrait? Bring them in. Are they taking it tonight? Maybe set this.
Okay, set it right here.
Will that work, Jack?
Yeah.
I can. This good for you?
Yeah.
All right, so I'd like to do one here.
Bring one in.
I'd like to present this to you and thank your family for what you've done here for Lancaster County. And this is on behalf of the County of Lancaster and the Board of Supervisors of the County of Lancaster. All right.
Why don't you turn it around?
Good evening to the Board of Supervisors and to all present. On behalf of the Nickens family, please know that we accept and receive this from a gracious heart of gratitude and in honor of our forefathers and our ancestors. And may this proclamation continue to be an inspiration of his civic duties and his achievements for generations to come for our families and our communities. Thank you again so much. You have it? One hand?
Karen, are you gonna take this tonight?
I can, but I'll need it for another couple of weeks.
Now let's see if we can get it back up there. You've got a lawyer, don't you? They were hung by a professional.
On the right side needs to come down a little bit.
Right.
We'll do it later. We'll worry about that later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our-
I
our
would have
next-
guessed that would come.
Our next presentation is the Broadband Authority. Ms. Thompson?
That's
Oh,
obviously
it's
not
not-
Cassie.
Good evening, Michelle Craddock here. Cassie was feeling under the weather today, so I
Okay.
told her that I would come and do the report. That's okay?
Yes.
There's not a whole lot of updates, other than some good news. You might recall that APB is scheduled to start construction in January 2023 and complete by the end of 2023. But they've been able to secure a contractor that's going to be scheduled to do the work here in Lancaster, and so they don't anticipate any labor shortages, which was one of their concerns as far as potential delays go. So that's good, and they've also stockpiled a lot of material, so hopefully there won't be any delays. The other good news on that is that the Virginia State Corporation Commission held its hearing on Dominion's petition for approval of the Northern Neck project for them, Dominion building the middle mile, and that was held on September 8th. And just on September 19th, we checked, and the SCC hearing officer has recommended approval of that project. So Dominion is seeking to recover $32.1 million for the project, which total cost is $43.9 million. That's for the middle mile section. So that's good. Things are progressing, and hopefully we'll stay on schedule. Then the Breeze Line project is also on schedule and ahead of schedule. Total construction is 65% complete. That doesn't mean 65% of the homes have service. It's the initial infrastructure work was done first, and now they're getting to the homes. So that's about all, unless you have any questions.
Any questions, gentlemen?
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Okay, school renovation, construction, and activity update, Mrs. Davis. Oh, okay.
Well,
Yeah.
sorry about that. Got a quick slideshow for you guys on some of the things that have been happening with school over the past few months. We move on to the next slide. In July, this was a slide that I showed the last time I spoke here. Basically, behind the site, you can see all the stormwater piping back behind the property. I think when the kids showed up for the first day of school, they were very excited, thinking that was their playground equipment. That wasn't the case. But over the next few months, and this is what the next few slides show, we can move to the next one, Don. Basically, in August, they were working real hard to get that drain pipe in the ground. You can kind of get a sense of the scale of this from the man standing beside the machine. Down, it's a big hole. It's 500 feet of 4-foot pipe. I did the math on it today. It's about 9,000 gallons of water that this encompasses. So it's a pretty big project. We were lucky; had a lot of good dry weather through August, and they were able to proceed. So yeah, the next slide. This is all the pipe laying in there. We can go to the next one. And this is currently basically what we've got now. It's all covered up, and the contractor's working hard on getting the road completed behind the building. So that was a lengthy, 2 months part of the process, but it was an important part of what we're doing at the school, because the stormwater was certainly one of the big issues that we had. And that they did have with the library as well, when it was a library. So it was nice to get that part of the project behind us. Yeah, we'll get to the next one. This is the courtyard area. Again, this is a slide that I showed in July. Again, you can see how the stormwater plays part in this. They were able to get all the piping in. And I think the next slide gives you an idea about where we are today. So you can see a lot of progress is made. It was important for them to get this done before we got the new wing up on the building. So for all intents and purposes, courtyard's pretty much done. We've got a few other things that we'd like to do in this area, but this is basically completed. And it doesn't really show here, what's improved a lot with the courtyard area is the drainage. One of the big issues we had with the courtyard before was it just stayed wet back there, and it wasn't a whole lot of positive drain flow. So we're getting ready to test that out this weekend. Next slide. This picture, again, this is one that I showed in July when we were here. Basically showed the demolition that had taken place on the old 6th grade wing. They've been working hard Again, over the past 2 months, getting it to a point that it is now, and I think the next slide will give you a good idea about where we are with the process. Basically, all the piping, electricals, it's all roughed in. We're ready for the concrete pour. We were hoping to get that in this week. We weren't able to make that happen, but the concrete slab will be poured, hopefully as soon as things dry out next week. And you should also start to see the actual steel part of the building being erected on the site. Again, this is sort of our layout map that we keep going back to in the project. Work with the contractors using this map a lot when we talk about areas of the school. Right now, Area 1 is that new part of the building that you saw being, the foundation of that. It's in place. The contractors are working real hard in areas 3 and 4 of the school. Students are basically in areas 5 and 2 and 7. Come December, January, we'll switch them over to areas 3 and 4. Contractors will move back over to the other side of the school. So this is part of Area 4 within the school. It's an old science lab. The contractors are demoing all those old science lab-type desks that were in there. We'll be going back and pouring the terrazzo floors in these areas once all that equipment's removed.
You gonna maintain that as science area?
They will be, but it'll be different, Mr. Palin. I'm not in curriculum, so Jessica's probably a lot better versed on that as I am. But as we move to elementary school, they will have science curriculum, but not like it was at the middle school.
Yeah, so we're gonna move to more tables where they can work collaboratively instead of the double.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and I don't think they'll have the need for sinks and
No.
that type of equipment in the rooms. Again, this is another picture. It's similar to one that I showed. It's very similar to what we did over the summer in a different area of the school. Just shows how we took the lockers out of the hallway. They're creating these breakout spaces, so the teachers will actually have a space in the hallway to, they can bring kids in and have some more one-on-one time with them outside of the classroom. Another picture, this probably doesn't excite a whole lot of people, but I get excited about it. So this is the VRF equipment that's on top of the roof. This equipment's state-of-the-art. It's very similar to what you have here in this building. The gray base that you're looking at in the front of that picture, that's actually the base for the DOAS units. Those are not here yet. Sort of a supply chain issue. We're hoping to get those within the next few months. And but that's the unit that actually brings the fresh air into the school. So it's an important piece of what we're trying to do. And I think it's my last slide. This is an antenna that was installed over the past few months. I just wanted to share with you the guys that do the radio communications with emergency services had this installed on the school, and we've been working close with them. In the past, they've had to put up a temporary antenna. It's kind of a pain for them every time they had an event. So now we've got a more permanent solution. If something were to happen and the shelter would need to be, opened up, they would have their antenna ready to go and just kind of a plug-and-play situation. Any questions about the project?
Any questions, gentlemen?
On schedule, right?
On schedule, looking good so far. We are running into a few things, lights, a lot of electrical things. We're seeing some supply chain issues. At this point, we do have time. I'm not feeling like that's going to hold anything back, but we're kind of keeping our eyes open on that stuff.
In the early childhood center, that's everything running smooth over there.
It is, but we really need to get the playground put in. And as soon as William Wells gets the road straight, we can start working on the playground area and getting that put in. The kids are, I see it every day. I get a reminder every day when I see the kids walking across, going to a playground beside school. But I should share with you that the community's really rallied around this playground. We've gotten a lot of support from a lot of different organizations, and it's going to be a really nice playground for the children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gill?
Mr. Chairman, in keeping with my practice of introducing new employees to the board and the public, we recently hired a new permit technician for our building office, and she is here with us tonight. Evie, would you stand, please? This is Evie Farage. If you come in the office and see a new face, that's her. She comes to us from Fairfax County, where she had 10 years' experience as a permit technician and a permit technician supervisor. So she's got a lot of experience. We're very fortunate to have her on our team, and just want to introduce her to the board and the public.
All right.
Welcome.
Welcome. Yeah. All right. Now we're going into the public hearing session, and we can talk about resolution authorizing the issues of a bond. All right, Mr. Gill?
Mr. Chairman, the Board of Supervisors adopted its FY '23 through '27 capital improvement budget at its May 26th meeting this year. The construction of a new middle high school was included in that adopted capital improvement budget at a total cost of $60 million, spread out over 3 years. At its June 30th meeting, the board was briefed by Davenport Public Finance, the county's financial advisor, on different options for funding that $60 million. At your July 28th meeting, you authorized staff to pursue funding the school-related capital improvement items through the Virginia Public School Authority Fall Bond Pool. The next step in this process is the adoption of a resolution authorizing the issuance of a maximum amount of general obligation school bonds. The amount listed on the resolution is a little bit more than $60 million. It's $63,160,000. That's because VPSA, Virginia Public School Authority, recommends adding a 5% buffer to your requested funds to allow for any additional upfront costs as well as a discount structure. And that's why the figure is $63,160,000. Since this is a general obligation bond backed by the full faith and credit of the county, a public hearing is required. The notice of this public hearing was advertised in the Rappahannock Record on September 8th and September 15th as required by law. You have seen the financing calendar. You know that there are specific dates that different entities, governmental entities, have to act to keep all of this on track. One such thing was the school board had to also adopt a resolution, and they did so at their September 12th meeting. Your financial advisor and bond counsel, Sands Anderson, and Davenport Public Finance representatives are here tonight. Ted Cole with Davenport and Dan Siegel with Sands Anderson. They provided you an affordability analysis which analyzes and explains both the potential school financing as well as the non-school related capital improvement budget items, which have been estimated at $5 million. We have both of those, an in-depth discussion on both of those during the consideration items, and they can get down and explain this very well to you. I don't know how far you want to get down in the weeds on this public hearing, because this public hearing is just for adoption of the resolution to authorize the issuance of those bonds. But they can explain that affordability analysis now, if you like, or they can do it during the consideration item. I don't see the need to do it twice.
No.
I guess it would depend on what the board would like.
I'm thinking doing the consideration item. What you all think?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, yeah, just doing consideration. All right.
That's all I have, unless you have any specific questions for me.
Okay. Well, at this particular time, y'all have any questions for opening it up? All right, I'm opening up the public hearing to, yeah. Where am I? All right. Again, you have 3 minutes, and at the end of 2 minutes, I will hold up this sign and let you know you have 1 minute left, okay? Thank you.
I'm James Vick. I was here 4 years ago when we went through the same stuff.
Yeah.
You bought a piece of land, the school board had to have it. Good Luck Road. Paid $800-some thousand, this county's got into it. This ain't only me, taxpayers got paying for it now. It's growing weeds. I don't know how much money they spent on the architect fund, but that was spent too. And we got nothing out of it as taxpayers. They had to have it. The school board, y'all went ahead and bought it. Same thing's happening tonight. Y'all done approved all this stuff, you ain't had no public hearing on it. You talking about the paper? The only thing in the paper said y'all would have a sometime at the end of this month.
There was a public hearing for the capital improvement budget, yes, sir.
Well, it wasn't in the paper, no
Yes,
place
it
nobody
was.
could
Yes.
understand, because nobody even knew about this tonight till I called 4 or 5 people.
It was in the paper,
I know
yes,
it
it
was in the
was.
paper this week,
No, it was in the paper for the capital improvement budget as well.
but it was not a hearing on it here, I'll say that. So we got that. Now you got the school down at School Street. They're working on that. You got the kindergarten school down there. I would like to know, to let the public know how much money has been it's gonna be spent on School Street, including what's done in the kindergarten. Do you have any idea?
The early childhood center was $750,000 in county funds. They had some private donations as well. The entire bill was over $1 million, but I don't know the private donations. County funding was $750,000. The renovation of the middle school into the elementary school is $13.145 million.
And the taxpayers has to pay for that part. And
Your time's ticking, sir.
I got some other things too, but I forgot.
Got a minute left.
The only thing I got to say, we need schools. I agree with that 100%, but we don't need to go in debt $63 million for 460 students. This is a brick school up here. There's no way it cannot be renovated, just like you're doing down at the middle school. You went ahead and purchased the property down at the ball field. We already got 800 and some thousand up here for a piece of property that was worth 400. That's tax assessment on it. That ain't my figures. This is the county tax assessment, but we paid 800 for it, or they did. And I like to know one thing. I like to know who's running this county, the school board or you, the board of supervisors. Because it looks like me, the school board is running this county, not the board of supervisors, because anything they say, what's happening, you go along with it. Just like that $800,000 piece of property down there growing weeds. Who got the other 400,000? What it was assessed for? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, anyone else? Yes, sir.
Howard Kaiser, District 3. This fellow touched on some of the stuff, but the way this thing should go down is you guys should take the least amount of tax dollars from us that you possibly can and stretch every one of them as far as you can and pay the bills of this county. But the things, and he touched on some of them, but the things that we've seen out here that's been done is just nuts. Like the property, dual property, selling properties, presentations, drawings, cost millions wasted. But the main thing I can't get past is that I can't get 635 people in this room. I can't get them in here. But I gave you and the school board a document, not ratified petition, wasn't ratified, we wasn't trying to get it on the ballot, we were just trying to tell you that we wanted to say in what happened when you get ready to spend $63 million. You think that's what you're gonna spend, you don't know that yet. You hadn't paid all the bills. But we tried to tell you that we wanted a say. We wanted to know what it was gonna cost, how it was gonna affect our taxes, and then we decide through a referendum that the school board would have had to initiate, I think. We were completely ignored, completely ignored. The school board used the reason that it wasn't ratified. Well, we weren't trying to give you a ratified document. We were just trying to state, in one day, we had 635 people sign that petition. We could have made it 2,000. If we took a couple, 3 days, we could have got that many. You completely ignored it. The school board completely ignored it. You have never mentioned it in the paper or any meetings or anything. And I was hoping that maybe the two new members might step up and think on their own. I doubt it. I don't have big hopes for that. I think they're gonna fall right in line. When you take your vote, they'll fall right in line. It's just wrong. You have no business ignoring everybody. Yet we're gonna get involved when it comes time to pay the bill, I bet you. We'll be involved then. This is a want. It's not a need, and you know it.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Yes.
reply to
Yes.
that? So I am one of the new members, and if someone had run against me in my district, they would have heard what I stood for. But unfortunately, no one ran. I ran unopposed. And I've quickly learned at these meetings, I only see people when it's an issue that affects them. And yes, I'm going to vote for it, but I was going to vote for it regardless of whether I was a school board member or not. Do I want to spend the money? No. But if we actually had paid for this and done this 15 years ago like we were supposed to, it would have saved us a ton of money. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
But the need is not there.
All right.
Can I say one more thing before I leave? It ain't what the bill
Point of
is.
order, Mr. Chairman.
All right, point of order being called, sir.
Sit down,
And
sir.
you
Point of order.
Come on, I got it. All right, thank you. All right.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
we did not ignore the public. Y'all have a right to go to the polls in November and vote for the members of the Board of Supervisors you choose fit to serve you and elect you.
Get the same thing we got now.
Well, then that's because the majority of the people do not support your view.
Come on, sir. Yes, sir.
Charlie Costello, District 2. For over 20 years, I've been a member of the Facilities Committee, asked by the superintendents to serve on that committee. It took place, it was throughout the county members and worked on these particular things. The need was here 20 years ago, probably before that. I've been through those schools. I wouldn't want to be in there in any way, shape, or form. You can't renovate something and make a little Salsier out of it. But anyway, I support this. I support it because I believe in education. I'm a product of public schools. My family paid for taxes, not here, other places. But education's important. And we're starting to tutor again, and I'm looking forward to it. These kids need help. They need the best. We want to have a better economy. Schools will help in us bringing it into our economy. This is a win for the county. 63 million over years. I'm not going to pay all that. Neither are these people. It's a thing we need to do. There is a need, and you are doing what you should be doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right. Anyone else? Any other comments? Anyone who wants to speak? Anyone online? No, sir. Okay. Public hearing is now closed. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move for the approval of the consensus docket.
Let's go back and this a resolution first, yeah. All right.
I thought we were in the consideration docket.
Yeah.
Yeah, you jumped ahead one.
Yeah. I move that we adopt the resolution and authorize the county administrator to execute all related documents. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Unanimous vote, okay. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Now I'll move for the appropriation of the consensus docket.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion has been carried, okay.
Salaries and invoices.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve The total invoices for $1,365,692.62. Total payroll, $362,638.38 for a total of $1,728,331, of which capital improvements were $736.54 and ARPA funds of $19,542.74.
Okay, you've heard the motion. All in favor, said aye.
Aye.
Unanimous vote, okay? The next one here is non-school related capital improvement budget. Mr. Cole, Mr. Sickle.
Glenn, give me PC 2.
Good evening. I'm Ted Cole with Davenport. As County Administrator said, Dan Siegel with Sands Anderson is here, as is my colleague Ben Wilson. This particular item is for the non-school capital projects in the approximate amount of $5 million. And I believe they have this on the screen as well. So we're going to sort of take these in pieces, and we'll deal with the school here in another item. So everybody should have a book that says RFP results summary on it, and there are page numbers in the lower right corner. And if you go to page 2 while this is pulling up, again, what we're discussing here today is an approximate $5 million borrowing for county projects that were identified initially as a P25 digital radio upgrade, expansion to the Kilmarnock Convenience Center site, and various public access projects. As we've moved through the process of assessing the funding options for these, we've also built into the documents and the approvals, giving you all the ability to also fund other county capital projects if any of these projects are delayed or there's a change in the prioritization. So while the radio upgrade, the convenience center project, and the public access projects are the sort of the impetus for having done this funding process, you will have the ability, if everything's approved, to use these monies on other county capital projects if you choose. So for these projects, we did a kind of what we call a dual funding approach. We did a bank request for proposal, which we've done for you all before. The bank proposals came in on September 15th. And we also submitted an application to one of the state programs called the Virginia Resources Authority, not to be confused with the Virginia Public School Authority. That's a separate group. And what I'm going to walk through for you this evening is just the results of the RFP, the comparisons. We were very pleased. We received 7 different proposals from banks, some local banks, as well as national banks that we deal with on a regular basis. So if you go to page 3, this is the summary of the bank rates that we received, and we purposely asked for 3 terms. The term of the debt as short as 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years. We wanted to be able to assess the different rates, what the annual payments would be, things of that nature. And what you see here are the rates that were quoted by the 7 banks, and the 2 banks in particular that we focused on were listed at the bottom. Truist Bank, which is the merged bank between BB&T and SunTrust. They've come together as Truist over the last year or two. And Webster Bank, which again may not be a household name, but we deal with them. They bid on local government loans quite often. So what you'll see there is for the 10 and 15-year, Webster Bank had the lowest rates. For the 20-year, Truist had the lowest rate. All of these are fixed for the term, whatever term it is that they quoted. And you can kind of see the spread. We had some rates that were, getting close to 5%. We have seen rates rising. In our planning work, we had been estimating this borrowing at 4%. So if we decide to move forward with either Truist or Webster, you'll see we're going to be just under the planning rate we had been assuming of 4%. Page 4, there's a lot of info on here, but we focused on Webster and Truist, and then we've also brought in the Virginia Resources Authority, which is your other option for this loan, going to a bank versus going to or through the Virginia Resources Authority. And let's focus, because this is kind of where a lot of our discussion with staff was on the 20-year term. Because keep in mind, we're looking at this loan, but we're also looking at, as you well know, the school financing at $60 million. So we've been focusing on the 20-year term, and for Truist, that was the 3.87%. With Truist proposal, you'll have the ability to prepay that loan. During the first half of the loan, you would have to pay a 1% prepayment penalty to pay it off. During the second half of the loan, there would be no prepayment penalty. Truist is very flexible on what the loan collateral would be. This would not be a general obligation of the county. This would be secured by a piece of property. Truist has indicated they'd be very flexible on that. Preliminarily, we had identified with staff that the corrections facility, I believe is what you refer to it as, would be a good candidate for that. It's valued around $2.5 million through your insurance carrier. So we would be potentially borrowing $5 million and able to secure that with one of the county assets that's valued at about $2.5 million. And Truist indicated that if that's the way we want to proceed, they would be fine with that. Their rate is firm. It's held firm. We would need to close by November 4th, which we are able to do if things move forward. This would be your one action on this borrowing. If we go with the bank, we will need to have the EDA meet. They meet later this month. We've typically have used the EDA in past borrowings. It's just what we call a conduit borrower in Virginia. That's a pretty common way to borrow for these types of projects if you're not issuing general obligation bonds, which we are not. This would be a lease financing secured by that other asset. They would allow you to put that money in it when it closes into a state investment pool that you would earn the interest on that. We would expect the EDA would charge an annual fee. They typically do that, but then they take those dollars and they reinvest them in the community. We're fully approved, and the bank would have an attorney working on their behalf, which is pretty typical, an attorney from McGuire Woods. So that's Truist. And what I'll tell you on VRA, VRA is an excellent program. They issue bonds 3 times a year. They are planning to issue bonds in late October. So for them, you'll see the 20-year rate is a 4.07. It's been going higher as rates have been moving, and we would not be in a position to lock the rate with VRA until late October. So this is a current market estimate. It's already higher than where the bank is. We think there's a reasonable expectation that rates could go higher between now and October 25th when they lock in their rates. So I'm sort of cutting to the chase, which is in talking with staff, we're of the opinion that the bank financing is the way to go for this $5 million borrowing, not going through VRA. And we felt like the 20-year term through Truist sort of struck the best balance of having the lower interest rate than VRA, but also having a longer term, spreading those payments out a little bit. I'd like you to see the debt service estimates on page 5, and I would point you to the far right columns, H, I, and J. Again, I'm focusing on the 20-year, but if you want to look at the 15-year or the 10-year, it's on here. The 20-year Truist is in the middle, column I. We're assuming we would close in early November. Again, you all would consider a resolution this evening. The EDA would consider a resolution at their meeting. That would be the approval. We would lock that in, and the funding would be available to the county at closing in early November, and you'd be able to spend that on the projects. You'll see the payments are about $382,000 a year under that Truist proposal. You can see Webster Bank's a little bit more because their rate was not quite as good, and VRA's a little bit more as well. They're, given that their rate isn't quite as good either. So, if you wanted to look at the 15-year term, for example, Webster Bank had the lowest rate of a 362. You're paying less over the life of the loan because it's a 15-year loan rather than 20, but the payment's higher for that same reason. So again, back to our thought process with staff, given what you've got going on with the school borrowing, we felt like taking this out 20 years on a fixed rate basis made some sense. Let me pause there for a minute and see if there's any questions on the numbers, any questions you might have about the different banks, VRA, the different terms that we've discussed.
But it looked like the total debt services is lower for Truist too, over the whole period of 20 years. It's
Correct.
7.6.
7.6 compared to about 7.7 for Webster, and getting closer to 7.8 million for VRA. That's right. So it's the lowest rate, and as a result, total payback over the term is lower.
And some of this funding is supposed to be earmarked for the radio project.
Yeah, but it's the way the resolution, the way that Dan Siegel and his folks at Sands Anderson have crafted the wording of that resolution, it could be used for public access sites if we're not ready to go on the radio project.
With the radio project, will we get 20 years out of that? I wouldn't want to finance something for 20 years that's not going to last 20 years.
The life expectancy of that would probably not be 20 years.
I think that should be a consideration if we're thinking about funding something with a bond. We should probably be paying for that in a term that its service life is.
Well, we've got some discussion on the radio project coming up later. I don't know if we're in a position to move on that yet. We are in a position to move on these public access projects that we have going on. So the way the resolution is written,
Lots of flexibility.
yeah, the money could be used for the public access sites and nothing go toward the radio project and worry about that later. Or some of it be devoted to the radio project and public access. So it's flexible.
Yeah, and I think if,
I have a question real quick. How
Yes.
about paying the loan off early? Is there a penalty for that? You may have mentioned that.
with Truist, you're able to do it at any time, starting immediately, but for the first half of the loan, there would be a 1% penalty to pay it off or to refund it, with another lender.
Okay.
With VRA, you're not able to do any of that for the first 10 years. So you do have the ability, but there would be a penalty for the first half of the loan under Truist. Under Webster, they have generally a 5-year no call. You can't do anything for the first 5 years, and they have a 1% penalty for years 6 and 7, and then no penalty thereafter. So every bank's a little different, but you've got some period of time on the front end where either there's a penalty or a no prepayment clause, and then you're able to refund it somewhere down the line. And, on the 20-year term with the radio, I certainly understand that concern. And, some folks have looked at that and said, if we're going to spend some money on a radio, maybe that's a 15-year asset, and we're spending other money on a longer-term asset, we can sort of think of it as we're going to be trying to amortize, or we would be amortizing the radio part of this loan first, and the land would constitute the longer part of the loan. I realize that's a little bit of semantics, but that is one way to look at it and say, look, we're not funding only the radio, we're funding other things that do have a longer useful life to them, and maybe that helps you get to a place where 20 years can make some sense. Okay, and I did want to share on page 6, always like to have local banks in the mix, and you've got some very good local banks here that we've done a number of loans with. We've seen a lot of volatility in the interest rate environment. Banks are always a little bit different from one another. They all have different math behind how they put interest rates in front of clients and the math that goes into that. It's complicated in an environment like this with the Fed doing what they're doing. They're raising short-term rates. We've got a lot of other concerns in the economy. And so we've seen even wider differences from one bank to the next. And I know oftentimes there's an interest in, what does it look like if we were to go with the local bank? And that's what this comparison does on page 6. And if you look at the 20-year term on the far right, compared to the lowest 20-year bank proposal we received at Truist, the additional interest expense over the life of the loan using, looking at either Blue Ridge or Chesapeake Bank is, upwards of $200,000 to $500,000 over the life of that loan. So we appreciate getting any bank proposal that comes in, but it's a fairly meaningful difference in rate and interest expense. Let me go to page 8, and this maybe will allow you all to sort of give your thoughts and some direction. As I said, for this particular borrowing, this would be the only county action needed, and there are resolutions for you to consider, and Dan Siegel is here to talk through any of those questions, or the county attorney as well. So we're really talking about two things. Do we want to go with the bank, or do we want to go with VRA? And if we go with the bank, which bank? And again, we have been talking with staff about bank financing through Truist. If you wanted a recommendation, that would be our recommendation. And then the VRA approval that you've been given in that application just go away if you don't go forward with VRA. They're aware that we were looking at bank financing as well. The EDA would need to consider a resolution, and I believe they're meeting on October 20th. And then we would be in a position to, actually I misspoke earlier, there would be a final approval needed from you all on October 27th. So this evening would say move forward with XYZ Bank perhaps, EDA approves, and then we come back for one more approval from you all once we have the documents finalized with that bank lender.
We're okay,
Okay, I'll take that back. Then this would be your one and only approval.
we were faster than we thought we
Okay,
could be. So you have those documents.
gotcha. So I'll stop there.
Mr. Chairman, I'm in favor of moving forward, the bank, Truist. I think the numbers speak for themselves.
Yes. All right. And issued through Langston,
EDA.
All right. You gentlemen all agree with that?
Where's Truist Bank located? Where are they headquartered?
Saluda's the closest one.
Yes.
They're headquartered in Atlanta,
Okay.
and
Yeah, I know we have one in Saluda.
BB&T was headquartered in Winston-Salem, and SunTrust was headquartered in Atlanta, and the merged Truist is maybe Atlanta or Charlotte. It might be Charlotte, but
The local branches is one in Saluda and one in Deltaville.
Okay.
You know, much as we'd like to stay with local, I think the numbers kind of pulling us away from it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of difference. Yeah, there's a lot of difference.
I entertain a motion on this one.
I move that that we move forward with Truist Bank through the EDA at, local EDA here at the county. I think that's the two we need.
Adopt the appropriate
Okay,
EDA
and
resolution.
adopt the resolution. I thought that was gonna be separate, but okay.
Yeah, well, you can do it all.
We can do all at the same time?
Yeah.
Do that separate.
Okay.
Do
Okay.
it separate.
Do it
Okay.
separate.
All right, you've heard the favor, You've heard the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. All right,
We need another motion for the.
Yeah.
yeah.
Resolution.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah,
to the rest?
Mr. Lee, yeah, I'll make it, so you have the resolution that says EDA financing on it? There were, there were two blanks One was the bank on page 1, right where there's a bold, the lender at the top, the second paragraph. And then there's a blank on page 2, at the bottom in paragraph 4, where it has the interest rate. And so if we do the Truist 20-year proposal, you would put Truist Bank, just for purposes of completing this resolution, and then you'd have 3.87 in paragraph 4 on page 2 in that blank. And so if you adopt the resolution before you with the EDA, those would be the blanks completed, just to make it clear. We didn't want to presuppose which way you were going to go on things, so we left that part behind.
Well,
I'll
Mr.
be
Chairman,
glad to answer questions.
Move that we adopt the motion with the
resolution.
The EDA resolution.
Yeah, the EDA resolution, and that the Truist Bank and the interest rate of 3.87.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you,
You've
Mr. Lee.
You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous vote. Okay.
Would you explain for just a minute why no public hearing is necessary?
Oh, well, this is, since it's a lease revenue bond and it's subject to annual appropriation, it's not a general obligation. The general obligation bond that you did with VPSA required a public hearing under the Public Finance Act. This is under the EDA Act, really. And so it does not require a public hearing for a government financing. It's because it's subject to annual appropriation and is a lease revenue bond. Is that?
If you don't make the payments, they take the correctional center. Might be okay.
And Dan reminded us during our many calls we had that going this bank route, the county would be paying the 1/8 of 1% of the outstanding balance per year as an administrative fee to our local EDA, who then turns around and makes local grants to local businesses. So it reinvests that administrative fee in the county, whereas the administrative fee that's paid to VRA would not be reinvested in the county. So that's a plus too.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, then we go into the next one, non-school related capital improvement. Again, Mr. Cole and Mr. Siegel.
Okay, so back to the school discussion. VPSA, Virginia Public School Authority, was the focus of your public hearing. We have some options with VPSA, and I'm going to sort of walk you through the way we think about this. We call it debt structuring, and I'll explain that a little bit. What we are planning to do at this point in our work with staff is VPSA will be able to facilitate a loan that goes out as long as 30 years. That's the maximum term that VPSA is able to facilitate. They will be selling their bonds on October 18th. So the interest rates through VPSA will be locked in on October the 18th. Their pool program, which happens twice a year, you all will be a participant, as will a number of other Virginia counties who are funding school projects. So if you go to page 2, this is the county's debt profile before any of this debt we've discussed tonight. And you can see it either graphically in the upper left. Each bar represents a fiscal year, starting with the year we're in, fiscal year 23. Or you can see it in the table in the right, principal payments, interest payments, and total payments. This is for all of the debt that's outstanding at the county level currently, before the school and before the $5 million. And you can see, I think it's maybe easier just looking at the far right, you're paying about $1,840,000 for the next 3 years. And then you have a loan that drops off and your payment goes to a little over $1 million. It drops off again and you're in the $800,000 range for a few years, and then it drops off again in 2030. You get to about $620,000 a year. We know that to the penny because you have different loans in place that were issued at different points in time. They mature at different points in time, and that's the step down. So you have a nice couple of years where you got some drop in your payments that we wanted to look at and say, okay, well, how do we bring on this new debt, the $5 million we just talked about, and the 60 for the schools, and minimize the impact on your budget or your cash flow. So we start with that. That's your debt profile. Next slide, yeah, thank you. A lot of numbers here. What I would focus your attention on is columns F, G, and H, because these are the revenues we've identified, working with staff, that you use to pay your debt. And column F is the $1,840,000. When the county administrator puts his budget together, he says, look, we got debt service this year of $1,840,000. We got to make $1,840,000 available from current year revenues. And you'll notice in column F, we've held that flat. Now, we know your payments are stepping down, right? We just went through that. But our approach to funding all of this debt will be, look, you've got $1,840,000 in your budget now, 23. Let's hold that flat. Column G is a little bit of some federal subsidies you get on a piece of debt. That's going to go away in a few years. We know that. There's no way to continue that. And then we've layered in column H, the revenue derived from the Waller solar siting. And you'll see that that starts in fiscal 25 at $1.5 million, and then it's $90,000 a year for a number of years. So a couple of things that we're trying to build here, right, is we know the existing debt, it's stepping down. We know the way you're paying for that debt right now is from current year revenues of $1,840,000, and we would say, let's hold that constant. We can add to that the revenues from the Waller solar siting, and now we want to see, well, how does the new debt fit into all of that, right? How do the new payments line up to the revenues available? If you go to page 4, this is sort of what we're setting up. We have built into this analysis $5 million that you just approved over 20 years, and we're going to look at the $60 million through VPSA, and we've run 5 scenarios. And the difference in the scenarios, let me talk about what's common in each of those scenarios. The $5 million for 20 years is constant. It's the same in every scenario. The $60 million, every scenario assumes that's a 30-year debt. That's the longest that VPSA will allow us to go. It assumes that we borrow that money this fall, and we do some structuring. The difference is in scenario 1, we do very little structuring. Our first payments for principal and interest are due in fiscal 24. There's no payments due in the current year for the school. When you go through VPSA, their first payments are not until next July, which takes you into fiscal 24. So there is no FY23 payment due. So don't worry about that. With scenario 1, we've said let's start making principal and interest payments immediately. With scenario 2, we have done interest only for fiscal years 24, 25, and 26. The nice thing about the VPSA program is they will let you do interest only during construction, for example. Or in this case, it's during construction, but it's also 3 years before that big drop occurs in your other debt. So it's all going to be paid off in 30 years. The question is, are we going to start paying principal in fiscal 24, 25, 26, or 27? And you have the ability to make that decision or allow county staff to make that decision. So scenario 2, we've said, let's do interest only through 26, and then we start paying principal in 27. Scenario 3, we introduce a new concept called capitalized interest. What that is, it allows you to borrow money to make interest for your first year's payment, if you choose to. Obviously, that comes at a cost, right? You're increasing your borrowing. You have to pay interest on that, but it may help make this more affordable. So in scenario 3, we've said, let's capitalize the interest. Let's borrow the money that we need to pay on the interest for the first year, and then we start paying interest out of pocket in 25, and we start paying principal back in 27. Scenarios 4 and 5, we take it sort of to its the maximum amount of structuring that we feel like we could do through VPSA, where we're still paying that loan off by 2053, but we're paying the principal back even more slowly. We're wrapping that principal around some of your other debt obligations. So while we're only borrowing $60 million for the school project, we might be adding to it through the capitalized interest, and we would be paying that principal back more slowly so that we have time to increase our revenues to make the payments. And this will come together in the next couple slides. You'll see there's pros and cons to this. Page 5. The graphic's a little hard to see, but what you're going to notice in all 4 of these charts is the dark green and light green is your existing debt. We know that today. That's done. It's in place. The gold is the borrowing for this school, and the $5 million. And the brown line is scenario 1. So scenario 1 is about as basic a structure as you are going to get. And that brown line shows what the payments are compared to scenario 2 in the upper left, compared to scenario 3 in the upper right, scenario 4 in the bottom left, and scenario 5 in the bottom right. And it's subtle, but you're going to see the difference is how much in debt service are you paying in the first few years versus how much are you paying later over the 30-year term. We go one more slide. This is where it all comes together. And what you really need to focus on here is lines 8 through 23. Because it's got the $5 million in here, but it's got it in here the exact same way for each case. 20 years, $5 million that you just approved. Starting on line 8 and going across, you'll see every one of those scenarios is giving you $60 million for the school. Current interest rates are around 4.5%. Our planning work was done at 5%. We still have about 3 weeks before VPSA prices their bonds. We hope that we don't continue to see rise in rates, but we're at about 4.5% right now. And then we filled in the grid with, is it interest only or not interest only? Do we have capitalized interest? What's our first interest payment? What's our first principal payment? And what's our final payment? Everything pays off by 2053. Line 15 is important. It's the total payback of principal and interest under each scenario, under the current interest rate. So scenario 1 is the least amount over the life of the loan. That's also the one where we did the least amount of structuring. Very straightforward. It's about $110 million. And then you can see as you go across, the total payback is getting greater. The debt's all still paid off by 2053, but the difference is we might do some capitalized interest, or we're just paying the principal back a little bit more slowly. It's the same amount isn't getting paid off every year. And so the question would be, why would we do that? And it gets to the bottom part of this page, which is the potential impact on your budget, on your tax rate, however you want to measure it. We've measured it in pennies on the tax rate to afford all of this. And you'll see with scenario 1 and 2, you need to come up with somewhere between 14 and 15 pennies worth of revenue in the next budget to make this all cash flow. Now, that doesn't mean you have to raise taxes 14 or 15 pennies. It may be the most obvious place to think of it, but it could be that you find revenue within your budget and you sort of manage it. But scenario 1 and 2, you would have to do that in fiscal year '24. That's the next budget you'll be working on. Excuse me. When you get to scenario 3 and 4 and 5, you'll see that there is an impact in '24, but it's not nearly as much as it was in scenario 1 and 2, but there are additional impacts in the other years. And then in our discussion with staff, that had some appeal, meaning giving yourselves a number of budgets over which to grow into this debt, manage the debt, manage other parts of your budget. There's probably a revaluation that goes on somewhere in that period of time. Just a number of ways that you can, as I said, grow into this debt rather than having to do everything in one budget, fiscal '24. Now you'll notice the overall impact on line 22 is less. So as we go across those scenarios, we're doing things in the debt structure that is adding to the total payback, but the trade-off is that the overall impact measured in pennies on the tax rate is lower. So that's the sort of the pros and cons associated with it. Scenario 3 may be the one that kind of, maybe finds the best balance. It's more expensive over the life of the loan than scenario 1 or 2, but it spreads out the need for additional revenue over a 5-year period, fiscal years '24 through '27. All in, it's the equivalent of about 12 pennies that would need to be worth of revenue that would need to be generated and brought in on a year-over-year basis. The very bottom line just tells you what number of pennies would you need to do if you did it all at one time in FY '24. And for scenario 3, it would be, I'm going to round up slightly, 10 pennies. So the difference is, if you went with scenario 3, hypothetically, you could do a one-time adjustment equivalent to 10 pennies, 9.9 pennies. Or you could do it over time, and it would be closer to about the equivalent of 12 pennies, but you would have 3 to 4 years worth of budget to manage it. So there's just different ways that you can choose to budget for this new debt service. We don't need any action on tax rates or budgets or anything like that this evening. I think what we're looking for, and that what we need to give to the VPSA folks, is which of these scenarios do we want to pursue, because they need to start getting things in order for their bond sale, and they need that guidance from us. So
should we be thinking about all the debt service? I think if we look back around 2027, that starts dropping down.
And we've taken all of that into account. So you're exactly right. That debt drops down, and remember, that debt is $1,840,000 right now.
Yeah.
We're assuming you can continue to make the $1,840,000 available. What we're showing you here is what do you need on top of that to make all of this work? Because keep in mind, on the $60 million borrowing, we're talking about almost $4 million a year of debt service by itself, right? Your existing debt that's already in place is about $1.8 million. Bringing on the school and bringing on the $5 million for the county is almost another $4 million a year. So what we're solving for here is the additional revenues needed by year measured in pennies, because it's a good benchmark, pennies of the tax rate. And again, repeating myself, but scenario 3, at least in our discussions, had some appeal because it spread it out. It didn't hit all in the next year, which again, the appeal there I think was you'll have some more tools to consider in future budgets that might help minimize the impact on the actual tax rate. You may find that there's surpluses that you're comfortable in your budget dedicating to debt, other economic development activity, a reassessment, any number of things that would allow you time to as I said earlier, sort of grow into this new level of debt service that you don't get the luxury of in the first two scenarios.
I would seem to think that affordability would be a big point. I mean, you can see how the total amount changes over years, but looking out 30 years from now, that's sort of just a guesstimate in a way, because there's possibility of refinancing, paying it off earlier, coming up with more revenues, and finances over the next 30 years are going to change a lot. So to me, right now, affordability is the biggest key. So scenario 5 seems to be the cheapest affordable option as far as affordability goes. Would that be a correct assessment?
It is, yes. It is the one that gives you the least impact on your budget in the early years. And as we looked at that, you know, it was sort of comparing line 15 to line 22. And scenario 3, 4, and 5, the tax impact is pretty similar. It's within a penny. But the total payback is, you know, $1 million to $3 million. So we almost reached a point with scenario 4 and 5 that the benefit of that additional structuring was getting minimized. I mean, I don't want to dismiss the value of 1 penny on the tax rate, but there's a point at which we're squeezing so much out of the tax, or just a little bit out of the tax impact, but we're incurring some additional costs that's, you know, not commensurate with that advantage. So you're right. Scenario 5 is the lowest impact, but when we looked at it in conjunction with the total payback over the term, we felt like the benefits were getting watered down quite a bit, and maybe scenario 3 is where, you know, kind of why we might have gravitated to that scenario.
Is that sort of the middle way point, then scenario 3 would be kind of the sort of the average place to be based on the other 2 scenarios?
Right.
Well, how do you feel about scenario 3? I mean, I have to ask. I mean, you're the one that sees this every day.
Scenario 3 would be my recommendation.
I mean, of course, my choice would be scenario 1, but we don't want to give everyone a heart attack up here and stress everyone out.
Yeah, what Ted has said about spreading this out over several different fiscal years and budget cycles makes sense, because from 2018 to this 2022, we have increased our fund reserve from 1.9 million to a little over 7 million now. We've done that by underestimating our revenues and overestimating our expenditures, somewhere to the tune of close to $1 million a year. So the fund reserve we built to a comfortable level. If we continue that pattern of an extra $1 million roundabout per year, that could go to debt service, possibly, and it would lessen the tax impact. Also, we are going to go out to RFP very shortly for a reassessment during calendar year 23, which will probably capture higher values than what we currently have.
We need to do that sooner than later.
Yes, and so you would be able to realize additional revenue without increasing the tax rate. Plus, as Ted mentioned, there may be other economic development opportunities down the line that provide additional revenue to the county. So those things will come staggered over the next several years, and so that's why we feel that staggering that tax impact out over several years is probably the best approach. And I think Ted hit it on the head when he said scenarios 4 and 5, you know, maybe you don't get as much bang for your buck, even though scenario 5 is the less impact, the least impact. So we kind of gravitated to scenario 3, and I mean,
That's right.
And so that's, if you're looking for a recommendation, I know you, I know you always do, and that's fine. It would be scenario 3.
Okay.
Plus, it looks like scenario 3 times really well with the extinguishment of some of our current debt too. It looks like, to me, it matches up pretty close there. So we're getting some cushion there from other debt reduction. So
That's correct.
And there's other potential revenue sources that come down the line from other solar projects, Airbnb, if we can ever get that appropriately managed.
And, you know, obviously no promises, but it would be extremely rare to think that a 30-year loan would not be refunded, not once, but probably a couple times. So we don't know when that will happen, what the benefit will be at that time, but it would be extremely out of the ordinary for a loan to go 30 years with never getting refunded. So
But it can't happen for 10 years.
we do know that. We're out of, that's a condition in the bond market that VPSA sells to, not the first 10 years, but they're excellent about monitoring those opportunities when the documents allow for it.
Okay. I move that we go with scenario number 3 and authorize the county administrator to proceed under this selected scenario. You've heard the vote, or motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous approval, okay?
Okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
Okay. Mr. Gill, emergency radio.
Mr. Chairman, back in June, our EMS chief, Matt Smith, brought forward a request to enter into a contract through cooperative procurement with a consultant, it was Federal Engineering, for design of the P25 radio system for Lancaster, plus contract review and negotiation. That was in June. It was $34,500 was the amount of that contract. At that meeting, Lieutenant Haywood from the Sheriff's Office and some members of the volunteer fire departments spoke and told you all that they still had some questions about the system, and you all asked if Matt could get Federal Engineering to revise their estimate and answer the questions that Lieutenant Haywood and his colleagues had. Lieutenant Haywood, and he'll speak in a few minutes, I'm sure, put together his own committee and talked about this. And what they have come up with is something totally separate from what was presented to you in June, because that was a contract to move forward with the design, contract review and negotiations for a regional radio system. What Lieutenant Haywood is going to propose tonight with the Winborn Consulting Group is an assessment of the county's radio system and a proposal of how to move forward. So that's how we got to tonight, and I think it's best if we stop right there and maybe let Lieutenant Haywood and his folks address the board, and then we can continue this discussion after that.
All right, Mr. Haywood. Lieutenant Haywood.
Gentlemen, for all those numbers, my head's hurting. Glad it's not my finances. The committee was formed with your approval when we were here in June. We've met pretty much weekly since then. We have met with a consultant, which is Winburn, spoke with them about our concerns about the system we have. We talked that we wanted to do due diligence to what we have, because 10, 12 years ago, we spent over $1 million of the county's money, and we wanted to make sure that that was not going to be adequate anymore, or give it a chance anyway, since we already had that. Since then, times have changed, the regional systems have come along, interoperability has become more important, so we do realize that. We're not opposed to the regional system. We're starting to embrace those type of things, but what we want is our input into what this system is going to be, because we're going to be the ultimate users. If you read the proposal from Winburn, they will consult with both the vendors, analyze the equipment needs to provide the best service for the county, and speak individually with all the shareholders about their concerns. The two proposals, the one that was in the package for tonight, the two proposals did not compare on an equal scale. The proposals from federal engineering on what they were offering to do for Lancaster County states under the scope of work that they would manage a project basically with L3 Harris. They were not looking at anybody else. The proposal says that we have seen from L3 Harris concerning what they were going to provide and not what the county wanted or needed. If we are going to go with this proposal, it at least needs to be quoted on an equal level that covers our written concerns and needs as users. The committee wants the vendor to do what we want based on the county's needs and not what they are offering to do. We do not want to lose any tower sites as well. The proposal from L3 Harris eliminates the towers at the sheriff's office, leaving the sheriff without coverage for the jail and court bailiffs. The proposal also moves a tower out of Kilmarnock and places it on Good Luck Road for the two counties to share. This will leave Kilmarnock without the coverage it needs for portable radio usage in buildings. The committee has done its job that the board has directed us to do, and here's our results. We'd like to thank you for your consideration of our concerns for the county, the safety, and the first responders and its citizens. We have tonight with us Mr. Alan Crummell, who is with Winburn Consultants. He's a project manager, and he has a short presentation of what they do. We met up with him, his company. They came to us. We talked with them about the problem areas in the county, our concerns, what we feel like this radio system should do for us. And he'll explain a little bit about what his company will do for the county to help us make a radio system that hopefully Jason, you expressing how long was it going to last. With technology, it's hard to say as fast as it advances, but we want to see a system that is easily upgraded as things come along and doesn't give us a lot of cost. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, I'm
before you
sorry.
sit down. How does this fit in with the regional concept? Are we talking about something just for Lancaster? You know, we building something just, a system just for Lancaster without any?
No, we don't want to we don't want to not have interoperability. The regional system that they proposed to us, that I saw in a contract and the committee went through, states that, you know, they're going to do this, this, and this. It was no input from the users here in the county whatsoever that I saw, or the committee saw. So,
I guess that's what's bothering me, you know, I don't know what, so you all wasn't invited to the table?
no, Chief Smith was given this task to do to find a radio system. We all of a sudden were emailed a contract, and I'm not trying to throw him under the bus. Look, he's done a great job, but I wouldn't want to stick my neck out on the line being the only person that designed a radio system for this county, and something went wrong.
I want to jump in here a minute. Chief Smith couldn't be here tonight. He's got 3 small kids, 2 of them are sick, and his wife had to work, so he's on babysitting duty, and he's taking care of sick children, so he couldn't be here. I just want to add too.
He's online, right?
I don't believe he is.
He
no.
is, okay.
Is he online, Glenn? No. You know, we've been talking about the P25 mandate for 2 years. Chief Smith has researched this for 2 years. He didn't bring anything to the board until he was convinced that he had the correct approach. And that's why he brought that forward in June. I'll say that I went to a meeting in February at the Whitestone Volunteer Fire Department, and Jeffrey, you were there.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the system was talked about then. So to say that he hasn't been brought to the table is an incorrect statement. Because
I have an overarching issue. Chief Smith brought the proposal to this board in compliance with. Oh, I'm sorry. Chief Smith brought the proposal to the board as through a contract where we could piggyback on another entity, okay? And therefore comply with procurement. I'm not aware of any procurement having been done other than that.
No, not that I'm
So
aware.
if we're going a different way, and I'm not opposed to doing that, I'm not opposed to either Chief Smith's proposal or the lieutenant's proposal. I'm not opposed to any of that. Whatever's best for the county is great for me. But we're going to need to go through procurement in some manner. And one concern I have about Wilborn Construction making a presentation to the board is whether or not a competitor who might make a proposal would think that that was putting the cart in front of the horse, so to speak. If the Board of Supervisors has concerns both about Chief Smith's proposition and Lieutenant Haywood's proposition, that's fine. My suggestion is we go out for a request for proposal. Legally, we have to, unless we use a piggyback
Yes.
proposition. So that's my concern, because you didn't go through procurement, as I understand it.
No.
No. So if we could not enter into contract with Wilborn without procurement being complied with.
Okay, no, I was not asking to be under a contract tonight.
I
This
know,
would have to be considered at another meeting.
Well, we'd have to go out through procurement.
Right.
And you see what I'm saying? Wilborn's going to come in and make a presentation, but somebody's going to complain that's not fair unless we do it through procurement. And you're talking about one advertiser in the newspaper and
Yeah.
taking a proposal 10 days later. We're not talking about, we've been talking about this thing since June.
Yeah.
So it's not an emergency procurement. So my recommendation is, let's set up a committee, as we already have. Maybe we can use the committee we've got. But let's go through a procurement process where we issue requests for proposals, and then you get proposals in here, and within 30 days, you interview them and you vet them and make a recommendation to the board.
All right. Are you suggesting an RFP for another consultant to assess the system or for the actual radio system?
For that, you're going to have to do probably both. First consultant and then radio.
Well, I think the board needs to decide if they're comfortable with the request that Chief Smith made in June and the fact that all of our neighboring counties are going with the Harris system, the regional radio system. If the board is comfortable with that, you could vote to approve that contract. That contract is still good. It was verified today with federal engineering for $34,500.
As a piggyback contract.
As a piggyback
with
under.
no additional changes
Correct.
to it. Okay.
Correct. But if the board wants to study this further, then I think we do what the county attorney has suggested and go out to RFP for a
And there's
consultant.
nothing to stop federal from making a proposal under that.
And they have actually made a proposal, which it was sent in after I published the agenda, which is apples to what Wimborne has presented. But that's still only two, and we need a third.
Well, not if we go out through formal process.
Right, but
We go out
we-
through a formal
right.
request for proposals, advertise in the paper once, and get the proposals in within 30 days thereafter.
Right.
We can have one. It's not small purchase.
Right,
It's
but.
a formal process.
Yeah, well, yes, if we go to RFP. If we don't go to RFP, we need a third. We need a third. And it's less than 100,000, so it is a small purchase.
Let me
So,
ask this question. The company that Chief Smith is recommending, won't they also, once we say go ahead, give them the go-ahead, that they will also get some input from us?
they'll have to.
Yeah,
I don't see
that's-
how they could design it without our input.
Yeah.
I mean, is the concern of the sheriff's department and yourself that we want to make sure the radios work wherever we need them to work?
The concern of the committee, which was all the shareholders, is that when Chief Smith was designing this and studying this for 2 years, none of us were brought into that consultation. Yes, we did go to the presentation. It was a presentation, okay, we're L3 Harris, this is what we do for the regional radio system, and this is our proposal. And we were like, okay, well, just because this is for Northumberland and Richmond County and whoever it may be, how does it fit into Lancaster County? So they basically just came in and gave a presentation. It wasn't a sit down and we're gonna do this, and sure, they promised this, that, and the other. But we want something in writing that is our request of what we want of the radio system as a county. Not what the regional wants us to do. It's in writing what we want, basically an RFP of what the county wants this radio system to do for us. So that we're not back here another 10 years in the same position we're in now.
Can we do that? Can
I
we?
mean, that's, I
I
don't
don't-
understand what the problem is. If you write your recommendation down and say, can the FE
Yeah,
meet these requirements?
yeah,
I mean, either you can or you can't, and then we go from there,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
the one-
That's-
The-
that's
These
what I think.
consultants,
What I
I
don't
mean,
want-
I know nothing about designing a radio system. I know how they work, I know what we need, and the committee knows what we need, and, because they use it every day.
Yeah.
But as far as writing the RFP, I don't know, and that's what we need these companies to sit down and do, hear what we want, and write something for us, and present that to that company and say, this is what you're gonna build for Lancaster County.
Well, I don't want a tower being moved just because it benefits Northumberland and
Yeah,
Lancaster.
well, and that-
But it has to be a happy medium in there somewhere.
Yeah,
Well, that's what was presented at that meeting that night, that they were gonna do away with the tower in Kilmonica, and it was going to Good Luck Road because it benefited both agencies, or both counties.
I don't understand why we can't get you all the committee's recommendations on this is what we need in this county, and present that. And if this company, that Matt is talking about can't meet it, then
Well, they can meet it, and the reason the tower would be moved would because it would serve both Northumberland and Lancaster in a
but
better
we still meet
location.
all Lancaster's
it wouldn't give
needs.
us any dead spots.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
everything I saw at that meeting in February, to me, it was a no-brainer.
Well, is
And I've had members of each volunteer fire department tell me the same thing.
And I would think that we have some, we have a clause in there that if we do have some dead spots after the towers are put up, that they have to make sure that we're fully covered.
Wouldn't
mean,
they
if
be
I-
able to
if-
test all of that before they even really like,
Really light it up. Yeah.
isn't
We-
there a way
we
to
went
figure
out,
where they're gonna need to put stuff in order to make?
Yeah, some of our committee members went out the other day to some of the areas, Westminster, Canterbury, we had no coverage on the bottom floor. Windmill Point, inside the building, no mobile coverage.
That's under the current system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But these are concerns that need to be addressed with the future system.
It would be.
Yeah, that's my.
And it's
yeah.
an ongoing process,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, I don't want us to pay approximately $90,000 for somebody to make a recommendation to us, and the recommendation is basically gonna be the same thing that we talking about doing.
I understand that, but we paid $8 million for a recommendation about the schools. And so this is 92, or it may be come in less than that, but the committee feels like that, and expressing through me, that we need to have an RFP that if the regional system can follow with that, that's fine. But every county needs are not the same.
Right, but I would think he's dealing with each individual county, we just put it together to lower the cost.
The contract that was proposed in June under cooperative procurement would have a specific design feature for Lancaster, as well as contract review and negotiation with the regional provider.
The contract reads, paragraph 2.1, after a notice to proceed is received from the county, FE will conduct a review of the proposed design and contract from L3 Harris, the MPRRS vendor. Following the review, we will submit a design evaluation summary memo outlining our findings to the County Evaluation Committee to assist in their selection of the deemed desired offer and solution. The memo will also address items that need further clarification or discussion during contract negotiations.
So that's where the input's gonna be.
Okay, so is the committee that was formed in June before this was written, or after this was written, are we the consulting committee?
I would think so.
If you wanted to be.
I mean, we just want that to be
Yeah, I mean,
on the minutes, if
wouldn't
that's the
want
I
case.
think we just made them the consultant.
Yeah, I
would
mean,
think so.
like, I just want to get that clear because that was written before this committee was formed.
Yeah, well,
If we don't have, if we don't have the first responders on the committee about this radio,
Exactly.
then we're doing something wrong.
I agree.
That's right.
I agree.
So,
I agree.
I think that's got to happen.
And that's basically what we want. We want what our needs and concerns are for the county to be addressed as far as our first responder safety and the citizens.
Don, I mean, we can make that happen.
You
I mean,
can make it happen.
This
Yeah.
group been meeting for how many weeks, I don't know, but
Yeah.
they know what they want, you know, so they become that.
What's the, Jim, you got the contract up. What's the term for that committee?
Evaluation committee.
Evaluation committee, okay. Well, then I think that's the term that you all,
I mean, it's a simple requirement to tell whatever company we go with. A radio must work anywhere in the county, wherever the sheriffs are in any building. Make it happen.
well, it's sheriff, EMS, fire department, all of them.
Board of Supervisors?
Whoever has a radio that needs to have
But
communications
this
for
committee,
emergencies should.
you know, becomes the evaluation committee.
I think you can make that motion.
Yeah.
Is that-
I just made it.
Include the first
I
responder.
think he just.
Well,
made the motion.
yeah, I mean,
I just
that's,
made it.
every person on Jeffrey's committee is a first responder.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the motion would
And-
be using cooperative procurement to enter into the proposed contract with federal engineering and naming the, whatever you name your committee is.
Evaluation committee.
As the
Evaluation committee.
evaluation committee.
That's the motion.
Including Chief Smith.
That
obviously.
should-
Yeah.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And again, he was invited to these, we can't make it to meetings in the daytime because everybody works. I mean, I could make it to him, I work for the county, but, but I understand his situation with his family and so forth, but that was the only times that we could meet.
Yeah.
And-
Well, I
and
think
would
you
like
all
to
work that
al-
meeting time out.
Okay, and I also would like to where, because he's not here, where we can talk with, including Chief Smith and anyone else that he would recommend. Yeah, 'cause, okay, he didn't have.
That's
to
the
make-
motion.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, all right, read it
Yeah.
again.
You got that, Crystal?
Crystal got it. She's
Chris
good.
has got it, that's all.
Yeah.
You don't
Got it,
have
okay.
to-
And again, we weren't trying to make anything confusing. We just want the best for the system and what it's going to provide for us in Lancaster County.
Right.
Right.
Okay,
We do
got you.
too.
Okay.
I mean, I can, you know, it's like, okay, we're going to save money with Northumberland, that's great too, but with the current system,
It's
our,
not great if it don't work.
I agree. With the current system, I mean, Northumberland's needs and problems are different from ours. So that's why I'm saying the counties are not the same.
And we want ours to work better than theirs.
Exactly. We got to be first.
Motion on the floor.
All right, okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All right, unanimous vote. You got it, Lieutenant.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Okay. All right, board reports.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to briefly address some of the comments that were made tonight regarding the lack of transparency on the school. In this whole process over the last decade or more, there have been, I don't know how many public hearings and public input sessions that have been available for the public. And you noticed tonight when the gentleman that were here that made those comments left when the information that was going to be provided that they wanted was presented tonight. So the fact that there's been no public input is just a complete lie.
Good. Okay. Any
You
other
know,
board-
the one thing I would like to add to it, because I heard this from both of them, there's not a need. And to me, that's a person that has no knowledge of what's going on in the school system, or hasn't been in the school system, to say there's no need. That all this is just things that some citizens want. And that's, to me, is a statement that comes from a person who's hasn't set foot in one of these public schools in the probably last 10 years to say there's no need.
And to say that I'm controlled by the school board is not true because I'm controlled by God first and then my wife second.
And then the other thing, the comment tonight was, well, we ought to renovate these schools. Well, we've looked at those costs, and when you look at those costs compared to the new, it's not, I don't think that's a practical route. But I don't think they realize we've looked at those things too. So anyway, everybody has a right to their input, but I feel like we've looked at all of those alternatives.
Yeah, I agree.
a dozen times over.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, and he mentioned something about the property we bought on Good Luck Road. That property will not be just sitting there growing weeds and trees, but it will be put to good use. We're looking at some things, some options now.
We're working on that now.
Yeah.
We're gonna return a profit on that land to the county.
Yeah.
In more ways than one.
Yes. All right. Any other board reports? All right, County Administrator report.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I have under this is Jerry Davis, the Executive Director of the Northern Neck Planning District Commission, asked me to gauge the board's interest now on whether or not they wanted to join the Regional Industrial Facilities Authority. You remember, well, our two newest members won't remember, but back in 2020, the PDC facilitated creating a RIFA, Regional Industrial Facility Authority, for the Northern Neck, and Richmond County, Northumberland County, Westmoreland County, and King George all joined, but Lancaster did not at that time. This would be, this is big industry. This is something that's probably going to locate realistically in Westmoreland County or King George County, where the road infrastructure exists to handle big industry. They've got some, the RIFA is starting to get some traction. They're starting to meet, and Jerry asked me if Lancaster would consider joining now. I went back through the minutes back in 2020 when the prior board decided not to become a part of it. And the prior board also asked our CBRAC committee to weigh in on it. And the CBRAC committee weighed in and said that there was potential there for costs, greater potential for costs to the county with not as much benefit, due to the fact that the location of these larger industries would be further from Lancaster. Now, if something were to locate, a big industry were to locate in Westmoreland or King George, who's to say that some people who work there wouldn't be Lancaster County residents? You don't know. But anyway, Jerry asked me to gauge the board's interest now, and I know we have 3 holdover members from when this was first considered back in 2020. So do you have any thoughts on that?
What was the potential cost to the county again? I don't remember that one.
It was fees, annual fees, and any type of incentives that may be offered to locate those industries would be split between all the counties that would be a part of the RIFA.
I haven't changed.
Could
I
I
haven't changed my
Yeah,
mind
Could
on
I
that.
comment on that? Since I did the first Regional Industrial Facility Authority, which was Virginia's first Regional Industrial Facility Authority, that was the name of it, and I also did one, the Carl Grace and Galax Regional Industrial Facility Authority, and I appreciate all the rest of the localities in Virginia using my documents. But the Regional Industrial Facility Authority has 2 components. One component is obviously to run an industrial development authority of any sort, EDA, whatever. There's a cost to it. And there's a sharing of that cost among the participants in the Regional Industrial Facility Authority. The benefit to a locality is it also allows you to participate in a project. It's almost like a corporation where you're buying stock. If, for instance, you want to participate in a project in Westmoreland County, there would be a budget drawn up, cost or contributions would be determined. You could join or not join, as you choose. You don't have to, just because you're a member of the authority doesn't mean you have to be an investor in any project, okay? The benefit of being an investor in a project, it enables the localities who do decide to invest in that project to increase the investment, therefore increase the size of the project, but also receive a revenue sharing from the project. So, for instance, Virginia First Regional Industrial Facility Authority was composed of 15 jurisdictions. I think 7 or 8 of them joined together to do a project at the Dublin County Airport. It took a while. as all industrial projects do, to get off the ground, but we had the purchase of the land, and we had the cost of getting it up and running. The counties who decided to participate, the 7 or 8 of them, the cost was determined, and they decided how much of that cost they wanted to share. Some of them bought 1 share, some of them bought 4 shares, so we split the shares up on how much they wanted to participate. You go to Food Line and you'll buy some tomatoes. You'll see that some of those tomatoes are grown on that project because a Mexican firm came in and built a large greenhouse complex on that land. The revenue, tax revenue, all the revenue from that project is shared by the property itself is in Pulaski County. All the revenue from that project is shared among those jurisdictions who wish to participate in that project based upon how much investment, how much shares they purchased. Now, sometimes there are projects that, come along quickly. Sometimes there are projects that come along slowly. And sometimes there are, but the way, unless they've changed what I did, the way that it's structured is by being a member of the Regional Industrial Facility Authority, you will have some expenses, the expense of running the authority. But you will have the ability to participate in a project if you want to, that makes it a regional project and enables you to do cost sharing as well as revenue sharing from that project. So it gives you a seat on the table, in other words. And nothing may come. Something may come. There is a way now. It wasn't when I wrote it. State law did not allow you to withdraw, but I believe there's a withdrawal process now
There
where you
is,
can
yes.
withdraw if you decide not to participate anymore. But the way that it was structured was, you are a member of the authority, and you are given by being a member of the authority, you are given an option to participate in the project. You don't have to. And then you're also given an option to negotiate with the other localities who want to participate in that project how much your participation is going to be. It may be small, it may be large. Then when something does come and there's revenue generated, you will be sharing that revenue forever, basically.
So do we have any idea what the yearly fees are or what?
I don't know. I'm just gauging your interest. We would have to hold a public hearing to join, and I can, if we have interest, I can put all that together for your October meeting. Have the bylaws before you and put a good information package.
Well, Don, why can't you do this? Why can't you, find out what the cost gonna be? Just shoot it out to us, and you can gauge our interest where we wanna put it,
Okay.
Yeah,
if we wanna move
that's what
forward.
I was getting ready to say. I was gonna say I haven't changed my mind, but after you explain things, I have a clearer understanding.
Yeah, I'm glad Jim
Yeah,
spoke.
but now I would want to see,
Just,
yeah,
put together a little
Yeah.
summary,
Yeah.
okay, this is what it's gonna cost the county.
like they
Yeah.
did the last time.
Well, I am for bringing business in. I'd love for us to bring business in. I would assume there are other avenues for us to do this. I know that hopefully in the near future, we'll have an assistant to the administrator. And then when that happens, maybe the new role of either one would be to find avenues to bring businesses in. And it doesn't have to be through this
That's right.
No,
collaboration of other.
it doesn't.
But there are others
circumvent your
out
EDA.
there that we could be looking at, and I want us to do that as a county. And I think that because of technology, the road system isn't as valuable as it used to be.
Right.
It's not, in the old days, if you didn't live on the interstate, you just didn't have a business there. Well, those days are gone. So I think we can have business here, smart business.
Yes, sir.
You were saying that you join into the project. Are those projects then managed in the proportion that by those counties that invest in it?
Yes.
Or do they pay somebody to manage it?
Well, that's up to them. I
Okay.
mean, it's whatever the group who, as I say, in Virginia First, we have 15 jurisdictions, and you know how unwieldy that could be. But when we did the project at the Dublin Airport, I think, I can't remember, but I think maybe 7 jurisdictions participated in that. And they used, later they hired their own marketing But they primarily, at the beginning, relied upon the state marketing people as well as Pulaski County's marketing people, economic development people, because it was going to Pulaski County. And Pulaski County bought the biggest share. But it enabled, Pulaski County could not develop and I don't remember how many acres, it could have been 1,500 acres, I can't remember. You talk about flat land and the mountains, you know, you find it, you buy it. But Pulaski County couldn't afford to do the project by itself. So it got a group together, everybody invested some money. There was dissatisfaction because there wasn't any return being churned. At the time we started that, this is a 40-year project. We may not get somebody there for 40 years. Well, it turned into, I think it was 7 years when the Beta people came. But yeah, and it's all set out in the agreement, the project agreement. And once you do the project agreement, then the agreement becomes a Regional Industrial Facility Authority project, but the jurisdictions who don't participate don't have any say.
Okay, thank you.
I'll put together an information packet, circulate it, and we'll discuss it again before we schedule any type of public hearing.
All right. Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay. Closed meeting?
Mr. Chairman, we need a closed meeting to discuss specific personnel and acquisition, disposition of real property where discussion in public could affect the bargaining position of the county, as well as consultation with county attorney on specific legal matters. All under 2.237A1, 2.237A3, and 2.237A8.
Okay.
I move that we enter a closed meeting on those parameters.
All right. All those in favor of closed meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All right, unanimous. certification resolution. Whereas the Lancaster County Board of Supervisors convened in a closed meeting on September 29, 2022, pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote on the motion to close the meeting to discuss personnel, legal matters, and acquisition disposition of real property in accordance with section paragraph 2.2-3711.a.1 and 2.2-3711.a.8 and 2.2-3711.a.3 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas sections paragraph 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Board of Supervisors that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Lancaster County Board of Supervisors hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, number one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meetings requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting to which this certification applies. And number two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, disclosed, or considered in the meeting to which this certification applies.